Okay, so we're gonna just dive right in. I'm going back to the post on RFO, and let me just make sure I understand. So I'm trying to create a door that will allow me to set the top, bottom, side, inner dimensions, and intermediate dimensions as adjustable, and have the number of wood panels spaced out equally between these parameters, and adjust it when the parameters change. That all makes sense. So are we going for a parametric number of panels, or are we keeping it at 5? It looks like we're keeping it at 5. So in that case, this will be a bit easier to do. I wasn't sure if by your post, if you wanted to be able to change this between 3 panels, 4 panels, 5 panels, also doable. But it looks like here you've named the family 5 panels, so I'm going to assume it just wants to stay 5. So that's cool. All right, well, let's dive in. So you've already got a parameter for bottom rail, height of the panel, intermediate rail, style width, top rail. That all looks good. My first concern is I don't see those variables, and I'm afraid I'm going to see them if I go in here. Yeah, okay. So good news is you're on the right track. Bad news is we're going to change the way this is done a little bit. So what we're going to do first is we're going to just close out of this. So, hello? Okay, thought that was somebody I knew. We'll just get rid of them. Okay, so anyways, what you did in, yeah, we're gonna get a bunch of randoms coming in the meeting now. Okay, so what you did in here is all good. The trick is, and I don't think it's gonna actually let us save it, but we'll try, is you don't wanna do it inside the sketch. You wanna do it out here. Oh, it looks like it will. Cool. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll go into your sketch and we'll actually pull it all out. So what you did in here looks pretty spot on, but it needs to not be in the sketch. Or it could be in the sketch, but it's going to be better if we take it out. So let's just finish and then go back out here. And I actually normally have a rule that I always do these on the exterior side. There's no real reason for that. That didn't go well. There we go. That's what I was trying to do. All right, we'll do them on the interior side. For me, basically, what I do is I always pick, basically, I pick 2 views. So I usually use left and exterior, not because there's anything special about those views. It's just kind of how I do it. But it looks like actually maybe I didn't copy everything. So we'll go back. Oh, it's because there's no reference planes there. That's just sketch lines. Okay, that's cool. So let's just take all this out of here. Let's get these out of here. This, by the way, is not actually going to fix the issue at all. I'm just doing this as kind of a precursor. So we've got bottom rail on the reference plane, top rail on the reference plane, and on the reference plane. That's cool. So here, what I'm going to do now is go reference plane, reference plane. Of course, we want those to be equidistant, and we want that to be the interparameter that you already made. I'm also going to just up the scale to like 1.5 inches, makes it a little more tolerable working with the dimensions. So here you've already got inter height rail created, so we'll do that. And then we'll take these reference planes here and we'll copy them multiple times down to here and here and here. So we're not actually changing anything at the moment. We're just recreating what you had in the sketch. So I'm going to do one of these over here, one of these over here. And we're going to go rail and rail. So let's call that, I'm sorry, style and style, not rail and rail. Okay, so now we've done that. And now I'm going to go in here. So there's more I would say about if you get into doors, if you go into the family forum, you'll probably start reading about nested families, and you'll probably want to do this panel as a nested family and not as, you know, just an extrusion in this family, but you can kind of address that a little later. because then you won't have to make different families called 5-panel and 4-panel and 3-panel, and I can show you that a little later. For right now, what I did is I moved all your sketch lines off the reference planes, and my preferred method, even though it's a little slower, is I'm going to just zip around with my alignment tool and tweak or adjust all these lines to be back on the reference planes. So instead of putting a constraint on the sketch lines, because we moved the reference planes out and then put the constraints on the reference planes, now we're just aligning and locking all of the sketch lines to the reference planes. If I just deleted them and redrawn them, I could just use the click and lock tool, but even though it's a little slower, this is my preferred method just to make sure I always get the constraint on the right reference plane and that I haven't accidentally clicked on something that I didn't mean to. So we're just doing this all. Now the cool thing is, again, none of this is really what was causing the issue you were seeing. So what we're going to do now is we're just going to go check it real quick. So if the styles go up to 6 inches, that's cool. If the top rail goes to 6 inches, that's cool. Oop, I missed one apparently. It's weird. Thought I just did those. It's because there was still one in there. Okay, so now we'll align it. So, and then we'll make sure, did we do this one? I thought we did. Yep, we did. Okay, so now we're back where we were a few minutes ago. So top rail, 4.5 inches. Styles, if we change them back to 4.5, we should be all good. So now it looks like what you were trying to do is the main question that you asked was coming up with basically you have a dimension that's from here to here, and you want to divide that up into equal intermediate rail heights. Is my guess? Because you have a panel dimension here. So let's take a look at what you did for the panels. Let's bring this over here and say, let's just copy that and go into here. So let's see, take the height, subtract the top rail. So subtract the top rail plus the bottom rail plus an intermediate rail and then divide by 6. So that doesn't really work. Oh, I see. So you're saying what the intermediate, okay. So the interesting thing is, by the way, if you want these to always be equidistant, you don't actually, 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, I see the issue, I think. So there's a couple of interesting ways you can do this, by the way. And I'm not really convinced that you actually need to do it with a formula. So you're creating a formula for the panels here. And I imagine what you're trying to come up with is this so that you can space them. But what's kind of interesting about it is you essentially want your rails to basically just be evenly spaced between here and here. Now you can do that, and the only reason you can't by yourself at the moment is because you're going center line to center line, and the center line of this one, as you said, could be different, and the center line from this one could be different. But there's a really easy way around that if you don't want to do it with math, and that is if you introduce 2 more reference planes down here and do the same thing where you say this is intermediate rail height, we're simply not going to assign any geometry to those 2. So they're not going to do anything. And then we're going to do the same thing at the top. So if I go 2 reference planes that are useless and then go back to intermediate rail height. So the reason this is interesting is because now if you don't want to use math at all, you can just go from here to here to here to here to here to here and make them equidistant. And it's going to hold up. I say that, it should. I'm going to check it real quick because I'm talking while I'm doing this, and so I'm not necessarily thinking super clearly. But so if we go to 10 feet tall, that says to me, oh, Well, so first of all, I've got, okay, I did not carry across all the EQs earlier when we were bringing all those over. So let me finish that real quick. That's a minor mishap on my part. So let's pull those over, EQ, 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 EQ. There we go. And this one's already got the EQ. This one's already got the EQ. I would punch myself in the face for not being very organized, because in reality, I should just keep all these together. And this goes back to why I do all my constraints in 2 views. So I'll pick exterior and left. That's typically what I'll do. Yours I did on the interior one, just because I was a little disoriented when I was getting in here. But I'll typically always put my constraints in the same view so people know where to go for them. And then I'll try to do things like those are all the same kind of dimension. And this is an equality constraint. I could put this over there just to keep it organized. But all that to say, try to be neat about this. Now it should work so that at 10 feet, the panels are staying the same size. Intermediate rail height, you know, if you wanted to make it 6 inches, they should all flare up. Now, the reason it's working is basically our extra reference planes that aren't doing anything are simulating if all the rails were the same size, just to provide the center line for the equality constraint. So this will absolutely work. If you want to tidy it up a little bit, you can certainly like grab all the reference planes that we added in, and you can basically say, they're going to be like not a reference. That way you don't get all of the crummy, you know, noise, I call it, when your cursor is like hovering on them and stuff. So you can do that as well. We need to test the rest of this stuff because you always want to test it. So if the bottom rail changes to like 4 inches, you'll see that what happens is our fake reference planes are shifting down, and that's why the panels are staying equidistant. But even though those reference planes are now below the ground, it's still working out because the rail is still becoming what you want it to be for the bottom because it's tied to these. So that actually should work. Now, obviously, this will fail if you get down to a point where the rails and the panels can't reconcile, but that's just normal. And so now this panels doesn't need to be there. Since you were putting this panels in there anyway, let's just go back and take a look at how we would do it if you wanted to. I'm just checking Twitter real quick. I can't tell if this is a real person who wants to get in or not. That's okay, we're almost done anyway. So, okay, what I will say is, let's suppose for a second that you wanted to do this exact thing to come up with the height of the panels. What's important to look at here is there's a little bit that was fuzzy inside here, right? So what you would really have to do, you're on the right track in terms of height minus other stuff, and then taking all of that and dividing it by, you know, whatever the number of panels is going to be. Now, you're totally right that because you want 5 panels, you basically want to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This might actually just be 5. Depending on how the math works out, there's a time that you would use 6 and a time that you would use 5. But since we're not actually counting the bottom rail, I think it's going to be 5. But the other stuff is where that gets interesting, because what you really need to subtract is, you're completely right about top rail plus bottom rail. Now you also need to remove 1, 2, 3, 4 times the intermediate rail. So we're going to go 4 times inter rail, like that. So this, all in parentheses, is now going to become the other stuff, right? So if we go in here like this, basically that, and I may have it slightly wrong. We'll give it a quick check and see what it does. The top is not a valid parameter. Oh, I probably pasted that in here poorly. Let's try it again. Oh, it's because I put brackets in there while I was goofing around in Notepad++. So, oh, that actually was somebody. And I apparently have a typo in there. I don't recognize your name. Okay, so in that case, you'll see that now it's coming up with something very much wrong. Oh, so what happens is I need an extra parentheses here because we want to do height minus all of that closed up. Sorry, I've got the parentheses in the wrong spot because I'm talking while I do this. There we go. So it's going to come up with 9.5, which means one of these sets of parentheses I can probably get rid of. Okay. Now, if we were to go look at it, I don't remember what the actual value is. So it is 9.5, but the last important part is, and I wanted to go through the formula just because you seem to want to do it that way. So this is a reporting parameter, which of course can't drive geometry. And it did that to you because essentially you can't put this parameter in here, I don't think. I'm not 100% sure, but it might tell us it's over constrained. Yeah, so what's happening here is, think about like if you're dimensioning a room. Basically, you've already got the height of the overall, you've already got the height of all of the rails in between, and you've got the height of the top and the bottom. So basically, what happens in these 5 slots, if you will, it's already set. It's set by whatever's left over, and trying to give it a dimension is now too many dimensions. So Revit won't let you do it. But all that to say, if you wanted to do it the dimensional way instead of this EQ constraint, so now that we have that, well, here, let's do this. Let's save this, and then we'll do a save as and call it. We'll call this one option 2. So if you wanted to do it that way, you could take off the equality constraints, and that would then mean that you could also get rid of the extra interrail parameters here. So you could get rid of those, and you could get rid of these that are down here. And then in theory, if you wanted to, you could start to put these back on here. Now, what you still have to be careful, and this is why I prefer to do it that way versus using the panel parameter, is you're going to find that it's going to let you do all but one of them. So you can do this, but you're still over constrained if you try to put, I think so. Yeah, so the last one is not going to let you do it because there has to be a remainder. Think of it like a division problem, there's got to be a remainder. So all in all, I wouldn't really do it this way, but if you wanted to, you could leave that off, because basically what's going to happen is that one's going to end up being 9.5 no matter what you do, because everything else is going to stay the same. So you'll see that it's going to work either way. It's really up to you which way you want to do it. Hope that helps. It was kind of fun to take a break from what I was doing today anyway, so there you have it.